I walked into the clinic with that strange mix of nerves and excitement, my fingers laced with errands. 5 months pregnant, and somehow it was all starting to feel real. Like there was actually a little life growing inside me, kicking, stretching, changing everything. I remember the scent of lavender drifting through the air, the soft jazz playing overhead, the way Aaron squeezed my hand as if he were just as in awe. He kissed my cheek before I ducked into the restroom. It was one of those kisses you file away without knowing why. That's when I heard it. Muffled at first like casual chatter you try not to pay attention to. But then his voice, Aaron's voice, clearer now. "You're the reason I don't mind coming here so often." He was laughing. Charming. That tone he uses when he wants something. And then a woman's giggle. Light. Playful. It curled around my spine like ice water. I stood there frozen, my hand hovering over the soap dispenser. Peeking through the crack in the door, I saw her. The nurse. Young, polished, and completely unbothered by the fact that my wedding ring and swollen belly were 10 feet away. She was smiling at him like I didn't exist. And he wasn't stopping her. That moment cracked something inside me. Not loudly, not violently. Just enough for air to rush in, sharp and cold. I walked back out like nothing had happened. But inside, something had shifted. I sat through the appointment like I was playing a part in someone else's life. Nodding when I needed to. Smiling when the nurse, yes, her, measured my belly and commented on how beautifully I was carrying. Aaron sat beside me, cool as ever, like the hallway moment never happened. He even joked with the doctor, making small talk while my ears rang with the sound of betrayal. I answered the questions. I let her touch me, and all the while, my stomach wasn't the only thing twisting. It was surreal, how normal everything looked from the outside. He held my purse while I changed, rubbed my back when I winced from lying too long. The perfect husband in the perfect scene. But his words echoed louder than the gentle beeps of the monitor. "You're the reason I don't mind coming here." What kind of man flirts with a nurse while his pregnant wife is feet away? What kind of woman flirts back, knowing? And what kind of fool was I, sitting there pretending not to notice? I didn't say a word on the drive home. He talked about lunch, about work, about how excited he was for the baby to start kicking stronger. I just watched the city blur past the window, hands resting on my belly like I was protecting something more than just a child. My silence didn't seem to bother him. Maybe he thought I'd already forgotten. Or maybe he knew I'd heard and was hoping I'd swallow it like I always did. But I wasn't swallowing anything this time, not anymore. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I stared at my reflection, not at the stretch marks starting to bloom across my sides, not at the roundness of my belly, but at my eyes. Something had changed in them. They looked harder, calmer too, in a way that almost scared me. I'd always been the type to keep the peace, to choose grace over confrontation. But grace doesn't mean silence, and peace shouldn't cost your dignity. He came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist like everything was fine, asked if I was okay. I nodded, because what was I supposed to say? That I watched him flirt while our baby kicked inside me? That I saw the nurse's smile and the way he leaned into it like he missed being wanted? I felt his lips brush against my neck. I didn't flinch, but I didn't lean in either. Let him feel the chill in the air and wonder where it came from. In bed, he fell asleep quickly, like guilt wasn't heavy on him at all. I lay awake with one hand on my belly and the other on my phone, scrolling through the clinic's staff page until I found her name. Emily. She looked even younger in her photo. Probably thought she was invincible. I stared at her smile on that screen until mine started to form. Not out of pettiness, but out of clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to start exactly where it all began. He tried to laugh it off when I brought it up the next day, said I was tired, said pregnancy makes women sensitive. That I must have misunderstood. Emily's just friendly, he told me, like I hadn't stood there hearing the tone in his voice. Like I hadn't watched her beam at him like he was her personal secret. I didn't argue. I just tilted my head, smiled like I believed him. That kind of smile that makes men comfortable, That kind of lie that keeps them from noticing you're loading the gun. He looked so relieved when I let it go. Went right back to talking about baby names and stroller colors, as if his words hadn't scraped something raw inside me. That's the thing with some men. They mistake quiet for forgiveness. But I wasn't being quiet out of peace. I was being quiet out of precision. That night, after he fell asleep, I got out of bed and sat at the kitchen table in the dark, just me and the glow of my laptop. I opened the clinic's contact portal. HR, anonymous reporting. I typed slowly at first, like I wasn't sure what I was doing. But with every word, the fog cleared. I detailed what I saw. The timing, the inappropriate remarks, the behavior I'd witnessed, the breach of professionalism, the discomfort it caused. I didn't sign my name, but I made sure they'd know exactly when and where to look. I wasn't trying to get revenge. I was just setting a boundary in a language they'd understand. When I clicked send, I didn't feel guilt. I felt awake. The next morning, everything looked the same. Aaron kissed my forehead while I made coffee, humming like he hadn't just gaslit his way through a conversation the night before. He handed me a banana and told me to rest more. I nodded, even thanked him. Let him believe the air had cleared. But inside, I was already miles ahead of him, past the doubt, past the hurt. I wasn't interested in confrontation. I was interested in control. Around lunchtime, I got the reply from the clinic's HR. Polite. Measured. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. A formal observation will be opened. Your discretion is appreciated. I read the message twice, then deleted it from my inbox. I didn't need to hold on to proof. I had faith in timing. I knew how institutions work. Slow, careful. But once they set their sights on something, they rarely miss. That was enough for now. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister. Not my closest friend. Not even the journal I sometimes wrote in when I felt too full of emotion to speak. This wasn't something I wanted to talk about. It was something I wanted to finish. There was power in the quiet, a kind of strength I hadn't felt in years. And for once, I wasn't chasing validation. I was building something better, a line, and Emily had already crossed it. That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks. Not because anything had been fixed, but because I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to protect what was mine. I wasn't angry anymore, not the kind that burns and screams. No, this was a colder kind of anger. One that plans, one that watches, one that waits. I woke up before the sun, sat in the nursery in progress, and placed my hand on my belly. We're okay, I whispered. Mama's got this. Aaron came in yawning, scratching his head, asking if I was up worrying again. I smiled and told him the baby had been kicking. He chuckled and dropped to his knees, pressing his ear to my stomach like he was the picture of devotion. Maybe he thought that's all it took. Touch my belly, kiss my neck, and all sins would be swallowed whole. But I wasn't starving anymore. I'd fed too many second chances to a man who never knew how to digest them. Days passed, and life kept its rhythm. But beneath the ordinary, something had already shifted. The observation file was open, the wheels were turning, and Emily, whether she knew it or not, was standing under a light she couldn't see. I didn't need to raise my voice or slam a door to protect my home. I just had to wait for the truth to do what it always does when you give it enough time. 2 weeks later, I found myself back in that same clinic, walking the same hallway, only this time my heart was quieter. Not calmer, just quieter. I'd prepared myself, layered calm over tension like armor. Aaron insisted on coming along, said he didn't want me going alone anymore. I nodded like it was sweet, though I knew it was guilt tugging at his schedule. Let him come. Let him perform. He still thought this was about forgetting. The moment we walked in, I noticed her again. Emily. Same glossy hair, same bright smile, but now with a little extra sparkle in her eyes. She looked at Aaron before she looked at me. Typical. Only this time, I wasn't just watching. I was recording it all in my mind like a camera hidden behind my gaze. I didn't blink when she greeted him a little too cheerfully, or when her eyes lingered a beat too long. I was calm. I was ready. Because I wasn't the only one watching her now. What Emily didn't know, and what Erin would never have guessed, was that the clinic's HR manager and director were watching that day too. Live. Hidden in an office upstairs with camera feeds open, their eyes on every interaction. Because of me. Because I said something when most would have stayed silent. I sat on the exam table like any other expectant mother, but beneath my hand on my belly was something more than life. It was control. And Emily had no idea she was walking straight into it. Emily checked my vitals like it was any other day, but she barely looked at me. Her focus was elsewhere. She laughed at Erin's jokes, touched his arm when handing him the ultrasound gel, and smiled like she was auditioning for something I never signed up for. I watched it all without saying a word, not because I was weak, because silence, in moments like these, is more powerful than rage. Let her keep digging. I'd already handed her the shovel. Then came the moment I'd expected. Subtle, but not subtle enough. As I turned to adjust my position, I caught her leaning in toward Erin, her voice low, like a secret. Some dads are just too charming for their own good. I felt his body stiffen slightly, like he knew how wrong it sounded, but didn't know how to react fast enough. I didn't look away. I didn't interrupt. I wanted that sentence to sit in the room long enough to be captured from every angle. I locked eyes with her after that. Just for a second. I didn't frown. I didn't glare. I simply held her gaze, steady and unshaken, until she turned away. She knew something then. Maybe not everything, but enough to feel the shift. Enough to sense that her power in this room had quietly expired. The kind of knowing that creeps in slow and cold. And the beautiful part? I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't moved a muscle. I'd simply let the truth walk in with its own 2 feet. We left the clinic like everything was normal. Erin talked about grabbing lunch, about how amazing it was to see the baby's little profile on the screen. I nodded, smiled at the right moments, even laughed once. But inside, I was still watching the clock. Because I knew what time the administrative team usually met. I knew when the HR manager would call her in. I knew that while Erin was looking forward to sandwiches, Emily's day was about to take a sharp turn. Later that afternoon, I got the notification I'd been waiting for. A message from the clinic. Thank you for your initial report. We've taken immediate action following today's observed conduct. The matter is being addressed in accordance with policy. That was their way of saying she'd been pulled into an office, that her flirting, her games had finally been seen, not just by me, but by people who could do something about it. No more whispers, no more pretending. I imagined her face when they told her. The flash of confusion, then fear, then the desperate scramble to justify what can't be explained away. He was just friendly, she might say. Or worse, blame me. But none of it would matter, because this time her charm wasn't enough. This time someone had seen behind the smile, and I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to announce my part in it. I just needed to sit back and let the cracks she created finally collapse. By the next morning, the clinic was buzzing. You could almost feel it in the air, like a storm had passed and no one knew where the lightning had landed. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I already knew. Emily was gone. Fired. Officially and irrevocably dismissed for unprofessional conduct with a patient. The words were sterile, clinical. But underneath, they screamed everything I'd already known. She crossed the line, and someone finally drew it. The HR manager called me personally. Her tone was calm, measured, but I could hear the subtext in every word. Thank you for your discretion. We've reviewed the footage, and the decision is final. She won't be returning to this facility. I thanked her, politely, formally, but my heart beat with quiet triumph. Not because I wanted to ruin Emily. I didn't. I wanted her gone. I wanted safety. I wanted proof that I wasn't crazy, that someone saw what I saw. That evening, over dinner, Erin casually mentioned it, like it had just occurred to him. Weird. Emily wasn't at the clinic today. He forked a piece of chicken, eyes fixed on his plate. I didn't look up right away. just stirred my vegetables, let the silence hang between us like damp linen. Then I smiled, softly, calmly. No, she's not. She has a lot of free time now. Maybe she can finally learn professional boundaries. He looked up at me then, and I watched the color drain from his face. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Like the woman sitting across the table wasn't the one he thought he could lie to, distract, charm. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, not because of what he lost, but because he finally saw the version of me he'd created, the one who watched, learned, and moved without warning. He opened his mouth, closed it again. No excuses, no defenses, just that blank, stunned look that comes when the mask starts to crack. I stood up slowly, taking my plate to the sink, letting the weight of my words fill the space behind me. I didn't need to explain how I knew. I didn't need to list the things I overheard, the emails I wrote, the footage I knew existed. That wasn't the point. The point was, he wasn't in control anymore. I'd let him believe he was steering the ship while I quietly built the storm around him. And now? The silence between us was louder than any fight we'd ever had. He tried to shift the mood, to ask if I was upset. I smiled again, tired of pretending I didn't see what I saw. No, I said, placing my fork in the dishwasher like it was just any other Tuesday. I'm not upset. I'm just done pretending this is something it's not. He didn't answer, didn't push, just sat there with his half-eaten meal and a new understanding settling in, one I hoped he'd hold on to, because it was the only thing he was leaving this dinner table with. Later that night, he tried to hold me, slid into bed like nothing had shifted, like dinner hadn't pulled the curtain back. His hand reached for mine under the blanket, fingers warm, familiar. But I didn't move. I let the silence speak for me. I wasn't angry, not in that loud, stormy way. What I felt was colder, heavier, like standing in a house you used to call home, only to realize the foundation had been rotting for years. You don't burn it down. You just stop calling it shelter. He whispered my name, soft and unsure. I kept my eyes closed, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Let him sit in the space he carved out with every flirtation, every gaslight, every deflection dressed up as concern. He'd lost something tonight, even if he didn't know how to name it yet. Not me. I was still here. But my trust, my closeness, that quiet devotion I used to offer so freely, gone. And the thing about that kind of loss is, once it's gone, it doesn't grow back. The next morning, he was gentler. Cooked breakfast, kissed the top of my head, offered to drive me to my prenatal yoga class. I said thank you. I even smiled. But it wasn't the same smile. It was the kind you give a stranger holding the door open, polite, detached. Aaron hadn't been replaced. He was still here. But the version of me who once needed him? She wasn't. She had learned something powerful. Not all betrayals need to be shouted to echo. There's a strange calm that comes after a storm, not because the damage disappears, but because you finally stop waiting for it to hit. That's where I found myself. Not healed, not over it, just steady. I moved through the days with a new rhythm, slower but stronger. I made space for naps in the sunlight. I started reading again, books that had nothing to do with motherhood or marriage, and I stopped asking Aaron where he was going or when he'd be home. That wasn't my job anymore. He noticed, of course, the shift in me, the way I no longer filled the silences with reassurance. He started offering things I never asked for, back rubs, car washes, new suggestions for baby names. All of it came too late. I wasn't angry at him anymore. I just didn't need him to be anything other than present. And even that wasn't required. What I needed was to be respected. And I finally understood that respect isn't something you request, it's something you enforce. So I set boundaries. Quiet ones, no yelling, no ultimatums, just the gentle but unmovable kind. If he crossed them, I pulled back. If he asked why, I told him. No more cushioning the truth with softness to protect his pride. No more hiding my disappointment to preserve his comfort. If he wanted to stay, he'd have to live in the truth with me. And if he couldn't handle that, then at least I'd be alone with my dignity. By the time my next appointment rolled around, I felt different. Not lighter exactly, pregnancy doesn't offer that, but anchored. I walked into the clinic alone this time, on purpose. I didn't ask Aaron if he wanted to come. I didn't give him the chance to pretend he was still part of something sacred. This wasn't about punishment. It was about peace. Sometimes reclaiming your space means deciding who no longer gets to stand inside it. The waiting room felt different now. I wasn't scanning for familiar faces. I wasn't bracing myself for flirtation dressed up as small talk. There was a new nurse at the front desk, warm smile, kind eyes. No sparkle of seduction, no games, just someone doing her job with grace. When she called my name, I stood up without hesitation. I didn't glance around to see who was watching me anymore. I was finally, fully present, for me and the tiny heartbeat I was protecting. Inside the exam room, I placed a hand on my belly and exhaled deeply. The monitor hummed to life, and there it was, my baby's heartbeat, steady and strong. And in that sound, I heard something more than life. I heard truth. I heard proof. I heard every decision I'd made whispering, "You did the right thing." I didn't need an apology from Aaron. I didn't need closure from Emily. I already had what they could never give me, my own voice, fully restored. On the way out, the new nurse handed me a tiny pair of knitted booties. "A little something from the team," she said with a smile. I held them in my hands like they were made of glass. Soft, simple, honest. No hidden meaning, no side glances, just kindness. It was the first time in weeks I felt seen without feeling watched. I thanked her, walked out the door, and didn't look back. Not once. Some chapters close quietly, and that's their power. When I got home, Aaron was on the couch, flipping through channels like nothing had changed. He asked how the appointment went. I told him it was fine. I didn't add details. He didn't ask for any. Maybe he finally understood that he was no longer entitled to every part of me. That access is earned, not given out like candy. I poured myself a glass of water, slipped off my shoes, and placed the little booties on the nursery shelf like a promise. To myself, more than anyone else. I looked around the room. Soft green walls, folded onesies, the faint scent of baby powder, and felt a deep, grounding peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't pretending anymore. I whispered to the growing life inside me, "You are coming into a world where your mother knows her worth." And as I rested one hand on my belly, I smiled. She lost her job. He lost my trust. But I lost nothing worth keeping.